The crimson sunrise painted the dusty horizon as Clara Everett's scream pierced the morning air, watching in horror as the slaver tied her mother's lifeless body to the auction post. Arizona Territory, 1878, a year that had started with promise, and now spiraled into the darkest day of Clara's 19 years. Her mother, Elizabeth Everett, lay slumped against the wooden beam, her once vibrant face now ashen and still, the victim of a fever that had ravaged their wagon train 2 days prior. "Got a fine specimen here." The slaver hollered to the crowd gathering in the makeshift market square of Copper Creek, a mining settlement just 3 days' ride from Prescott. "Young, strong, and educated too. Can read and write better than most men, I reckon." Clara struggled against the ropes binding her wrists, her cotton dress torn and dusty from the days of forced marching after being separated from the wagon train. Her honey-brown hair fell in tangled waves around her face, partially obscuring the tears streaming down her dirt-streaked cheeks. "Ain't right to sell her next to her dead mama," an old woman muttered from the crowd. "Shut your mouth," the slaver barked. "I paid good money for their passage papers when their wagon master sold them off. The mother wasn't supposed to die, but I ain't losing profit on account of it." Clara's eyes darted frantically among the faces hard-bitten miners, saloon girls, merchants, and drifters searching for someone, anyone who might show a glimmer of compassion. Her father had died 6 months earlier in St. Louis, prompting her mother's decision to head west for a teaching position promised in Prescott. Now that dream lay as lifeless as her mother's body, starting bid at $20, the slaver shouted. 15. Shouted a grizzled miner with yellow teeth and alcohol on his breath even at this early hour. 25, called another man, his intentions clear in his leering gaze. Clara felt her stomach lurch as the bidding continued. She closed her eyes, unable to bear the reality of being sold like livestock beside her mother's corpse. When she opened them again, she noticed a tall figure pushing through the crowd. Unlike the others, this man moved with purpose, his expression grim beneath the brim of a worn cavalry hat. "That's enough," the deep voice cut through the clamor of bidding. The slaver's head snapped toward the newcomer. "Stay out of this, mister. This is legitimate business." The tall stranger stepped forward, and Clara could now see him clearly broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. A silver star glinted on his vest. "Samuel Jackson, U.S., Marshal," he announced, his voice carrying across the now hushed crowd. "And there's nothing legitimate about selling a woman beside her dead mother." He turned to address the onlookers, especially when that mother died in his custody. "She was sick before I bought their papers," the slaver protested. Marshal Jackson drew closer, his hand resting casually on the holstered Colt at his hip. "Selling free citizens is illegal in the Arizona Territory, papers or not. You'll be facing a judge in Prescott." The slaver's hand twitched toward his gun. "I wouldn't," the marshal warned softly. The slaver's eyes narrowed, calculating his odds against the lawman. Something in the marshal's steady gaze must have convinced him they weren't good, for he slowly raised his hands. "Dennis," the marshal called to a deputy who had materialized at the edge of the crowd, "take this man into custody. The rest of you clear out, show's over." As the crowd dispersed and the deputy led the protesting slaver away, Marshal Jackson approached Clara. With gentle hands, he untied the ropes binding her wrists. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said quietly. Clara stared up at him, her blue eyes hollow with grief. "They wouldn't even let me bury her properly." The marshal's gaze softened as he looked at the woman tied to the post. "We'll see to that now. No one deserves such indignity." He removed his duster and respectfully draped it over Elizabeth Everett's body. What happens to me now?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marshal Jackson looked down at her, studying her face for a long moment before answering. "You'll live for both," he said simply. "Your mother wouldn't want her passing to be the end of your story." Clara's legs gave way beneath her, the events of the past days finally overwhelming her. The marshal caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms providing the first moment of security she'd felt since leaving St. Louis. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered against his shoulder. "No family, no money, nothing." I know a place, he replied. A ranch outside of Riverside, about 2 days' ride from here. The owner's wife runs a small school. They could use someone with education. He paused. If you're the teaching sort, Clara pulled back to look at his face, searching for deceit or ulterior motives, finding only sincere concern. I am. My mother was a teacher. I was to be her assistant at the school in Prescott. The marshal nodded. Then that's settled. But first, we'll see to your mother's proper burial. They buried Elizabeth Everett that afternoon on a quiet hillside overlooking Copper Creek. The marshal had procured a simple wooden coffin and arranged for the local preacher to say words over the grave. Clara stood stone-faced as the first shovelful of earth hit the pine box, her tears spent for the moment, though the ache in her chest suggested a lifetime's worth remained. As the last of the dirt was tamped down, Clara knelt beside the fresh mound. I don't know how to go on without you, she whispered to her mother. One day at a time, came the marshal's voice from behind her. He was holding the reins of 2 horses, his own sturdy gelding and a gentle-looking mare. The hardest part is deciding to try. Clara rose slowly, brushing the dirt from her skirt. The marshal had somehow procured clean clothing for her, a simple blue dress that hung slightly large on her frame, but was free of the grime and tears of her previous garment. Why are you helping me? She asked suddenly. You don't know me. Marshal Jackson adjusted his hat, his expression unreadable. Let's just say I've seen enough injustice to last several lifetimes. Occasionally, I get the chance to set something right. Clara studied him. There was something in his eyes, a shadow, perhaps, that spoke of personal loss, but she didn't press further. She had her own grief to contend with. I've never ridden a horse alone, she admitted, eyeing the mare warily. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Rosie here is gentle as they come. And we've got time for you to learn. That evening, they made camp by a small stream, having traveled only a few miles from Copper Creek. Clara's inexperience on horseback had slowed their progress, but the marshal showed no signs of impatience. You did well for your first time, he commented as he built a small fire. Clara sat on a fallen log, rubbing her sore muscles. I feel as though I've been dragged behind the horse rather than riding atop it. It'll get easier, he promised, pulling provisions from his saddlebags. Here. It's not much, but it's filling. He handed her jerky and hardtack along with a canteen of water. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the distant calls of night birds. Tell me about this ranch, Clara said finally. The one in Riverside. Cottonwood Ranch, he replied. Owned by the Thompsons. Good people. They run cattle mostly, but Rebecca Thompson started a school for the ranch hands' children and others from outlying homesteads. It's grown to about 15 students now. And you think they'll take me in? The marshal nodded. Rebecca's been looking for help. She's expecting a child soon. Clara watched the flames dance. I don't want charity. It's not charity to accept a job you're qualified for, he countered. Besides, Rebecca Thompson doesn't have a charitable bone in her body when it comes to education. She'll work you harder than those horses pull a plow. Despite everything, Clara found herself smiling slightly. You make her sound formidable, she is, but fair. He poked at the fire with a stick. Get some rest, Miss Everett. We've got a long ride tomorrow. Clara stretched out on the bedroll he'd provided, her body exhausted but her mind racing. As sleep finally began to claim her, she heard the marshal's voice, soft and almost reflective. You're stronger than you realize, he said. People usually are. The next day dawned clear and cool. Clara awoke to find the marshal already up, brewing coffee over a small fire. The soreness from yesterday's ride made her movements stiff as she rose. Morning, Marshal Jackson greeted her. Coffee? Clara nodded gratefully, accepting the tin cup he offered. The bitter liquid was strong enough to stand a spoon in, but its warmth was welcome in the morning chill. How far to Riverside? She asked after taking a cautious sip. If we make good time, we'll reach it by tomorrow evening, he replied, dismantling their small camp with efficient movements. There's a trading post about halfway where we can rest tonight. Clara watched him work, struck by the economy of his movements. Nothing wasted, nothing for show. She wondered what his story was, how a man like him had come to be a U.S. Marshal in this untamed territory. You said yesterday that you've seen enough injustice, she ventured. What did you mean? His hands paused briefly in the act of securing his bedroll. "That's a long story, Miss Everett, not one for the trail. We have plenty of time on the trail," she pointed out. He gave her a measured look, then resumed his task. "Perhaps, but some stories are better left untold." Clara didn't press further, recognizing the wall he'd erected. Instead, she finished her coffee and prepared to continue their journey. The day's ride proved less painful than Clara had anticipated. The mare was indeed gentle, and Clara was beginning to find her rhythm in the saddle. As they traveled, the marshal pointed out landmarks and vegetation, teaching her about the territory. "Those mountains to the west are part of the Bradshaw Range," he explained. "Rich in gold and silver, that's why there are so many mining towns springing up." "Like Copper Creek?" Clara asked. He nodded. "Though Copper Creek is smaller than most, probably won't last once the vein runs dry." "Is that how it is out here? Towns appear and disappear with the fortunes of miners. Some do, others find ways to endure." His gaze swept the landscape. "This territory's changing fast, railroads coming, more settlers each year." "My mother believed there were opportunities here," Clara said softly. "A chance for a new beginning." "She wasn't wrong," the marshal replied. "There's freedom in these open spaces that you won't find back east, but freedom comes with its own price." Clara considered this. "The price being lawlessness, men like that slaver, that's part of it. But I was thinking more of self-reliance. Out here you learn to depend on yourself, make your own decisions. For some, that's harder than facing down a gun." Clara fell silent, contemplating his words. Her entire life had been structured around the expectations of others, her father's insistence on propriety, her mother's educational goals for her. Even their journey west had been her mother's decision, not hers. For the first time, she faced a future entirely of her own making. They reached the trading post by sunset, a sturdy log building with a few outlying structures. A handful of horses were hitched outside and lamplight glowed from the windows. "Parker's Post," the marshal announced as they dismounted. "Been here for nearly 15 years. Old man Parker trades fair, and his wife cooks the best stew this side of the Mississippi." The interior of the trading post was warm and fragrant with the promised stew. Half a dozen men sat at tables, eating or playing cards. They glanced up as Clara and the marshal entered, their gazes lingering on Clara before returning to their activities. A broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper beard approached them. "Marshal Jackson, didn't expect to see you this way again so soon." "Parker," the marshal greeted him with a nod. "Need lodging for the night and whatever Martha's cooking." Parker's eyes shifted to Clara, curious but not unkind. "Of course. Martha will be pleased to have another woman to fuss over." He led them to a small table in the corner and soon returned with bowls of rich venison stew and chunks of fresh bread. Clara hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was before her. "Thank you," she said to Parker. "It smells wonderful." "Martha's doing," he replied with obvious pride. "Been trying to steal her recipe for 15 years with no luck." As they ate, Clara became aware of a man at a nearby table watching them intently. Unlike the other patrons who had lost interest, his gaze remained fixed, particularly on the marshal. Marshal Jackson had noticed too. She could tell by the slight tension in his shoulders, though he continued eating as if unaware. "Friend of yours," she murmured, tilting her head slightly toward the watcher. "Not likely," he replied quietly. "Finish your meal, I'll handle it if necessary." The man rose abruptly and approached their table. Medium height, with a thin mustache and expensive but trail-worn clothing, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Marshal Jackson," he said, his voice carrying a hint of an Eastern accent. "I thought that was you." The marshal looked up, his expression neutral. "Do I know you, mister? Not personally, but I know of you. The marshal who brings in his bounties alive rather than dead. Quite the reputation." The man extended his hand. "Elliot Warren." "I represent mining interests in the territory." The marshal shook his hand briefly. "What can I do for you, Mr. Warren?" Warren glanced at Clara, then back to the marshal. "I have a proposition. Private business. Perhaps we could speak alone." "Any business you have can be discussed here," the marshal stated flatly. "Miss Everett is traveling under my protection." Warren's smile tightened. "Very well. I'm looking for security for a gold shipment from my mine near Prescott to the bank in Phoenix. The usual guards are unavailable. I'd pay handsomely for your services. Marshal Jackson studied the man. I'm not for hire, Mr. Warren. I suggest you speak with the territorial offices in Prescott. They can arrange proper security. I'm offering 3 times the going rate, Warren pressed, and I'm declining. Good evening. Warren's face darkened. I've heard you're a principled man, Marshal. I respect that, but principles don't always serve one well in this territory. He nodded curtly to Clara. Madam. With that, he returned to his table. What was that about? Clara whispered. The marshal took a drink of water before answering. Men like Warren think everything and everyone has a price. They're usually right, which is why they keep trying. But not you. Clara studied his face. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. Let's just say my price isn't measured in dollars. After dinner, Martha Parker, a plump, cheerful woman with rosy cheeks, showed Clara to a small but clean room at the back of the trading post. Not fancy, but the sheets are fresh, she said, lighting a lamp on the bedside table. Been a while since we had a young lady stay here. Most women passing through are of the professional variety. Clara smiled at the woman's delicate phrasing. It's perfect, thank you. I appreciate your hospitality. Martha patted her hand. The marshal explained a bit about your situation. I'm sorry about your mother, dear. It's a hard country for women alone. Yes, Clara agreed softly. I'm learning that. Well, you rest now. Morning comes early around here. After Martha left, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, sudden exhaustion washing over her. The events of the past days crashed down all at once, and tears she thought she'd exhausted began to flow again. She buried her face in her hands, trying to muffle the sobs that shook her body. A soft knock at the door startled her. Hastily wiping her eyes, she called, Yes, it's Jackson. Just checking if you need anything before I turn in. Clara hesitated, then rose to open the door. The marshal stood in the hallway, concern evident when he saw her tear-stained face. I'm fine, she said before he could ask. Just a moment of weakness. Grief isn't weakness, Miss Everett, he replied quietly. It's the price of having loved someone. The simple truth of his words triggered fresh tears. Without thinking, Clara stepped forward, burying her face against his chest. For a moment, the marshal stood frozen, then awkwardly placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, she said, pulling back and wiping her eyes. I don't normally. That is, I'm not usually so. No apology needed, he assured her. But you should rest now. We leave at first light. Clara nodded, embarrassed by her display. Good night, Marshal. Good night, Miss Everett. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, your mother would be proud of your strength these past days. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the hallway. The next morning dawned gray and cool, with threatening clouds on the horizon. Clara joined the marshal for a breakfast of eggs and bacon prepared by Martha Parker. Storm's coming, Parker commented, refilling their coffee cups. Might want to wait it out, Marshal. Marshal Jackson glanced out the window at the darkening sky. How far to Riverside from here? About 30 miles due south, Parker replied. But that puts you riding straight into the worst of it. The marshal considered this. We'll push on. Better to face a few hours of rain than lose a full day. Clara concealed her dismay. The prospect of riding through a storm after only 2 days on horseback was daunting, but she refused to be the cause of delay. They departed an hour later, the wind already picking up. Clara's mare sensed the coming storm and grew skittish, requiring her full concentration to control. Stay close, the marshal instructed as the first drops of rain began to fall. If it gets too bad, we'll find shelter. The rain intensified quickly, driven by gusting winds that seemed to change direction with malicious intent. Soon, Clara was soaked to the skin despite the oilskin coat the marshal had provided. The trail became muddy and treacherous, forcing them to slow their pace. There's an old line shack about 5 miles ahead, the marshal called over the howl of the wind. We can wait it out there, Clara nodded, too miserable to speak. Her hands, stiff with cold, could barely maintain their grip on the reins. The mare stumbled on the slick ground, nearly unseating her. Careful, the marshal maneuvered his horse closer. Are you all right? Yes, Clara managed through chattering teeth. Just cold, he frowned, studying her pale face. We need to find shelter now, that shack's too far. His eyes scanned their surroundings. There. Those rocks might provide some cover. He led them toward a formation of boulders set back from the trail. As they drew closer, Clara saw that the rocks created a natural alcove, shielded from the worst of the wind and rain. Dismount, the marshal ordered, already swinging down from his saddle. He helped Clara down, her numbed legs nearly buckling when they touched the ground. Working quickly, he unsaddled the horses and secured them in a relatively sheltered spot, then unpacked his bedroll and saddlebags. From the latter, he produced a small bundle of kindling and tinder, carefully preserved in oilskin. Gathering wood in this would be impossible, he explained, seeing her questioning look. Always carry some for emergencies. With skilled hands, he built a small fire in the deepest part of the alcove, where the overhanging rock would prevent the rain from extinguishing it. As the flames caught and grew, Clara moved closer, desperate for warmth. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said matter-of-factly, rummaging in his saddlebag. "Here, it's not much, but it's dry." He handed her a clean shirt and turned his back to give her privacy. Clara hesitated only briefly before stripping off her sodden dress and undergarments. The marshal's shirt hung nearly to her knees, its sleeves extending well past her fingertips. She rolled them up and settled by the fire, wrapping his blanket around her shoulders. "I'm decent," she announced. He turned, his expression carefully neutral as he took in her appearance. "Better." Clara nodded, already feeling warmer. "What about you? You're soaked as well." "I'm used to it," he replied, but he did remove his wet coat and hat, hanging them on a jutting rock to dry. His shirt clung to his broad shoulders, and Clara found herself noticing the strong lines of his body before quickly averting her eyes. The marshal sat across from her, feeding small sticks to the fire. "Storm will likely pass in a few hours. We can continue to Riverside then." "I'm sorry to delay our journey," Clara said. "I should have been stronger." He looked up, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. "Strength isn't about ignoring your limits, Miss Everett. It's about knowing them and adapting accordingly." They fell silent, listening to the rain drumming on the rocks above and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Clara found herself studying the marshal when he wasn't looking the way his dark hair curled slightly at his neck, the small scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the capable hands that tended the fire with such care. "You were going to tell me your story," she said suddenly. "You said it wasn't one for the trail. We're not on the trail now." His movements stilled momentarily before resuming their rhythm. "Some would argue this qualifies as the trail. Please," she pressed gently. "I'd like to know something about the man who saved my life." He sighed, settling back against the rock wall. "Not much to tell that would interest a lady. Let me be the judge of that." The marshal was quiet for so long that Clara thought he'd decided not to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost as if he were talking to himself. "I was born in Tennessee. Father was a blacksmith. Mother died when I was young. Went to fight for the Union when I was 17, lied about my age. Saw things no boy should see." His eyes grew distant. "After the war, there wasn't much left for me back home, so I drifted west. Worked as a ranch hand, a scout for the cavalry, even tried my hand at prospecting." "How did you become a marshal?" Clara asked. A shadow crossed his face. "That's a more complicated story." "We have time," she reminded him softly. He poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing upward. "I was working as a deputy in a small town in Colorado. There was a woman, Catherine. She ran the local boarding house. We were close." He paused. "A gang rode in one day while the sheriff was away, robbed the bank, shot 3 people. Catherine was one of them." Clara's heart constricted. "I'm so sorry. I tracked them for 2 weeks. When I found them, I did things I'm not proud of. The new territorial judge happened to be in town when I brought what was left of them in. He saw something in me, potential for justice rather than vengeance," he said. "Offered me the marshal's badge." He shrugged. "Been wearing it for 6 years now. Do you ever regret it?" Taking the badge, his eyes met hers across the fire. "No, it gave me purpose when I had none, a chance to make some small difference in a world that often seems bent on chaos." Clara absorbed his story, seeing him in a new light. "Thank you for telling me." He nodded once, then rose to check on the horses, effectively ending the conversation. The storm began to abate an hour later, the rain softening to a gentle patter. Clara's clothes had dried enough to be wearable, if not entirely comfortable. She changed behind a screen of blankets while the marshal prepared the horses for departure. "The trail will be muddy," he warned as they set off. "Stay alert and follow my lead." The remainder of their journey passed without incident. As the day wore on, the clouds broke, allowing shafts of golden sunlight to illuminate the landscape. By late afternoon, they crested a rise and the marshal reined his horse to a stop. "Riverside," he said, gesturing to the valley below. Clara's breath caught at the sight. The small town nestled along a winding river, surrounded by rolling grasslands dotted with cattle. The setting sun gilded the scene, turning the river to molten gold and the scattered buildings to amber blocks. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," the marshal agreed, something like affection in his voice. "It is." They rode down into the valley as the last light faded from the sky. The town itself was small but orderly, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest, and various side streets branching off like tributaries from the river. The marshal led them to a 2-story building with Riverside Hotel painted on a sign above the door. Light spilled from its windows, and the sounds of piano music and conversation drifted into the street. "We'll stay here tonight," he said, dismounting and helping Clara down. "Tomorrow, I'll take you out to Cottonwood Ranch." The hotel lobby was warm and surprisingly elegant, with polished floors and a crystal chandelier. The proprietress, a handsome woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair, greeted the marshal with evident pleasure. "Samuel Jackson, it's been too long. Mrs. Reynolds," he replied, removing his hat. "You're looking well. Need rooms for the night if you have them." Her sharp eyes moved to Clara, taking in her travel-worn appearance. "Of course, and who might this young lady be?" "Clara Everett," the marshal answered before Clara could speak. "She'll be teaching at Cottonwood Ranch." Mrs. Reynolds smiled warmly at Clara. "Welcome to Riverside, Miss Everett. Any friend of the marshal's is welcome here." She led them to a small dining room adjacent to the lobby. "You must be hungry after your journey. I'll have Ling bring you some supper while I prepare your rooms." The meal was simple but delicious: roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. Clara ate with genuine appetite, realizing she hadn't had a proper meal since leaving Parker's trading post that morning. "Mrs. Reynolds seems to know you well," she observed between bites. The marshal nodded. "Her husband was the town's first mayor. Good man, died a few years back, but she's kept the hotel running smooth as silk." "Is Riverside your home?" Clara asked. "As much as anywhere," he replied. "I keep rooms at the jail when I'm in town." "And how often is that?" A slight smile touched his lips. "Not often enough, according to Mrs. Reynolds." After dinner, they moved to the hotel's small parlor. A fire crackled in the hearth, and comfortable chairs invited relaxation. Clara sank gratefully into one, the events of the day catching up to her in a wave of fatigue. "You should rest," the marshal suggested, noting her exhaustion. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." Clara knew he was right, but she was reluctant to end the evening. These past days with the marshal had created a strange sense of connection, one she was not eager to relinquish. "Will you stay in Riverside long?" she asked. "A day or two. I have reports to file, then I'll be back on the trail." He studied her face. "You'll be fine at Cottonwood, Miss Everett. The Thompsons are good people." "I know," she said quickly. "I'm grateful for your help in finding me a position." "It's no charity," he reminded her. "They need a teacher, you need work, simple as that." Mrs. Reynolds appeared in the doorway. "Your rooms are ready. Second floor, last 2 doors on the right." They thanked her and climbed the stairs. At Clara's door, the marshal paused. "I'll come for you at 9 tomorrow," he said. "It's about an hour's ride to Cottonwood." Clara nodded, suddenly shy. "Thank you for everything, Marshal Jackson. I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't intervened in Copper Creek." His expression softened. "Get some rest, Miss Everett." "Clara," she said impulsively. "Please call me Clara." He hesitated, then inclined his head slightly. "Samuel," he offered in return. "Though most just call me Sam." "Good night, Samuel," she said, testing the name on her lips. "Good night, Clara." He turned and walked to his own door, disappearing inside. Clara entered her room and leaned against the closed door, her heart beating inexplicably faster. The room was small but comfortable, with a brass bed, washstand, and small writing desk. She washed quickly and changed into the nightgown Mrs. Reynolds had provided, then slipped between the clean sheets. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to the Marshal, to Samuel, replaying their conversations, recalling the security she felt in his presence. She knew it was foolish. He was a lawman doing his duty, nothing more. Tomorrow, he would deliver her to Cottonwood Ranch and continue with his life, while she began the process of rebuilding hers. Yet as she finally drifted toward sleep, she found herself hoping their paths might cross again. Morning arrived with clear skies and the promise of a warm day. Clara dressed in her blue dress, now cleaned and pressed by the hotel staff, and arranged her hair as best she could without a lady's maid. Looking in the mirror, she was struck by how different she appeared from the frightened, grief-stricken girl the Marshal had rescued in Copper Creek. Her face was still pale, her eyes shadowed with recent sorrow, but there was a determination there that hadn't existed before. She met Samuel in the hotel dining room, where he was already seated with coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon. "Good morning," she greeted him, taking the seat opposite. "Morning," he replied, glancing up from a newspaper. "Sleep well, better than I expected," she admitted. "And you?" "Well enough." He folded the paper and set it aside. "I spoke with Rebecca Thompson this morning. She's expecting us." Clara's stomach tightened with nervousness. "What did you tell her about me?" "The truth. That you're educated and were to assist your mother at the school in Prescott before circumstances intervened." He studied her face. "I didn't share the details of those circumstances. That's your story to tell if you choose." Clara nodded gratefully. "Thank you." After breakfast, they collected their horses from the livery and set out for Cottonwood Ranch. The day was indeed warm, the air fresh and clean after yesterday's storm. Wildflowers dotted the grasslands in patches of yellow and purple, and birds wheeled overhead in a cloudless sky. "It's hard to believe such beauty exists in the same world as Copper Creek," Clara commented as they rode. Samuel glanced at her. "The territory contains multitudes, the best and worst of human nature, often side by side. Which do you see more of in your work, the best or the worst?" He considered the question. "The worst is often louder, more visible, but the best, it's there if you look for it. Small kindnesses, courage in unlikely places, resilience." His eyes met hers briefly. "Like yours." Clara flushed at the compliment. "I'm not sure survival qualifies as resilience." "It's where resilience begins," he replied. They crested a small rise, and Cottonwood Ranch came into view, a sprawling collection of buildings centered around a large, two-story ranch house. Massive cottonwood trees, true to the ranch's name, provided shade around the main house, their leaves shimmering silver green in the morning light. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the wide front porch. Even from a distance, Clara could see she was heavily pregnant, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "Rebecca," Samuel called as they rode into the yard. "About time you showed up, Marshal," the woman replied, her tone mock stern. "James was about to send out a search party." They dismounted, and Samuel helped Clara down before turning to Rebecca Thompson. "The storm slowed us down. Rebecca, this is Clara Everett. Clara, meet Rebecca Thompson, the most formidable schoolmarm in the Arizona Territory." Rebecca laughed, a warm, welcoming sound. "Don't let him fool you with that formidable nonsense. I save that for the ranch hands and my husband." She extended her hand to Clara. "Welcome to Cottonwood, Miss Everett." Clara took her hand, immediately liking this forthright woman with her direct gaze and ready smile. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mrs. Thompson." "Rebecca, please. And the opportunity is mutual, I assure you. This little one," she patted her belly, "is due in 6 weeks, and I can't manage 15 rambunctious children alone anymore." A tall man with sun-bleached hair and friendly eyes emerged from the house, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Marshal," he greeted Samuel with a firm handshake. "Good to see you." "James," Samuel replied. "This is Miss Everett." James Thompson's smile was as warm as his wife's. "Welcome to Cottonwood, Miss Everett. Hope the Marshal didn't talk your ear off about legal statutes all the way from Copper Creek." Clara smiled, relaxing slightly in the face of their genuine welcome. On the contrary, I had to practically beg for conversation, James laughed. That sounds more like our taciturn Marshal. Come inside, both of you. Rosa's just made fresh coffee. The interior of the ranch house was spacious and comfortable, with polished wood floors, sturdy furniture, and colorful woven rugs. A Mexican woman of middle age, Rosa, presumably was setting a coffee service on a table in the front parlor. Gracias, Rosa, Rebecca said as the woman nodded and retreated to what Clara assumed was the kitchen. She's been with us since we came to the territory. I don't know what we'd do without her. They settled in the parlor, Rebecca pouring coffee with practiced grace despite her unwieldy condition. As they talked, Clara learned that the Thompsons had established Cottonwood Ranch 8 years earlier, when the area was still largely unsettled. James had a vision for what this land could be, Rebecca explained. I thought he was mad at first, but it turns out he was right. She just married me for my cattle, James quipped, earning a playful swat from his wife. The school started 3 years ago, Rebecca continued. Just 4 children, then our foreman's 2 and a couple from a nearby homestead. Word spread, and now we have 15 regular students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Where do you hold classes? Clara asked. We converted one of the bunkhouses. It's not fancy, but it has desks, a blackboard, and plenty of light. I'll show you after lunch. As they talked, Clara became increasingly comfortable with the idea of staying at Cottonwood. The Thompsons were clearly kind, intelligent people who valued education. The position seemed perfect for her situation. There's a small cabin near the main house that we've prepared for you, James told her. It was built for Rebecca's sister when she visited last year, but it's been vacant since she returned east. That's very generous, Clara said, touched by their thoughtfulness. Nonsense, Rebecca replied briskly. You'll be working hard for your keep, I assure you. After lunch, Rebecca showed Clara the schoolhouse while James and Samuel discussed ranch business. The converted bunkhouse was indeed simple but well-equipped, with rows of desks, a teacher's desk on a small platform, bookshelves lined with texts, and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. We hold classes 5 days a week, 8 to 3, Rebecca explained. The curriculum includes reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and basic science. Some of the older boys also receive instruction in animal husbandry and land management from James, while I teach the girls household management and basic nursing skills. It sounds very comprehensive, Clara commented, impressed. We believe in practical education, Rebecca replied. These children will inherit this land someday. They need to know how to care for it and for each other. She rubbed her back, wincing slightly. With this little one coming, I'll need to step back for a while. You'd be taking over most of the daily instruction. I'm prepared to do whatever is needed, Clara assured her. Rebecca studied her thoughtfully. The Marshal told me you lost your mother recently. I'm very sorry. Clara nodded, her throat tightening. Thank you. He didn't share the details, but I gather the circumstances were difficult. Rebecca's voice was gentle. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm a good listener. Thank you, Clara said again, genuinely moved by the offer. They walked back to the main house, where they found Samuel preparing to leave. You're not staying for dinner? Rebecca asked, clearly disappointed. Need to get back to town, he replied. Got word of trouble north of here that requires attention. Clara felt a sharp pang of disappointment. She'd known he would leave, of course, but hadn't expected it to be so soon. I'll walk you out, she said impulsively. Outside, Samuel checked his saddle and saddlebags before mounting his gelding. Clara stood nearby, suddenly unsure what to say. You'll be fine here, he said, seeming to read her thoughts. The Thompsons are the best people I know. I believe that, she replied. I want to thank you properly for everything. He looked down at her from atop his horse, his expression softening. You already have, will you? She hesitated. Will you come back, to check on me, I mean? Something flickered in his gray eyes. I pass through Riverside regularly. I'll stop by when I can. It wasn't the promise she'd hoped for, but Clara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Safe travels, Marshal. Samuel, he reminded her softly. Samuel, she echoed, a small smile touching her lips. With a tip of his hat and a final nod to the Thompsons, who stood watching from the porch, he turned his horse and rode away. Clara watched until he disappeared over the rise, then turned back to her new home and the life that awaited her. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity as Clara settled into her role at Cottonwood Ranch. The schoolchildren, initially wary of this newcomer, quickly warmed to her when they discovered her knowledge of Eastern cities, her skill at storytelling, and her genuine interest in their lives. Rebecca proved an excellent mentor, showing Clara the systems she'd developed for managing the diverse ages and abilities of their students. As Rebecca's pregnancy advanced, Clara gradually took on more responsibilities until she was handling most of the daily instruction herself. Her cabin, though small, became a cherished sanctuary, the first space that was truly her own. With Rebecca's blessing, she added personal touches: wildflowers in a pottery vase, a colorful quilt on the bed, and her mother's few remaining possessions displayed carefully on the mantel. The Thompsons included her in family meals and evening gatherings, making her feel less like an employee and more like a distant cousin who had come to stay. James taught her to ride properly, and Rebecca introduced her to the intricacies of ranch life. Yet despite the warmth of her reception and the satisfaction of her work, Clara found her thoughts returning often to Samuel Jackson. She found herself watching the road whenever riders approached, hoping to see his tall figure among them. But as weeks passed with no sign of him, she tried to focus on her new life and put aside the memories of those intense days in his company. 6 weeks after Clara's arrival, Rebecca went into labor. The ranch's routine ground to a halt as Rosa and the midwife from town took charge, sending James to pace the front porch and instructing Clara to keep the students occupied in the schoolhouse. After 12 hours of labor, a lusty cry announced the arrival of William Thompson, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair. Clara, released from her schoolroom duties, visited briefly to congratulate the exhausted but radiant Rebecca. "He's beautiful," Clara said softly, gazing at the tiny bundle in Rebecca's arms. "Isn't he?" Rebecca agreed, her face glowing with maternal pride. "Would you like to hold him?" Surprised and touched by the offer, Clara carefully took the newborn, cradling him as she'd seen mothers do. His tiny weight in her arms awakened something unexpected, a longing she hadn't known existed. "You're a natural," Rebecca commented, watching her. Clara returned the baby, unsettled by her emotional response. "He's perfect. You must be so happy." "Exhausted but happy," Rebecca confirmed. "And grateful you're here to manage the school while I recover." That evening, as Clara sat on the porch of her cabin watching the sunset, James joined her, looking both elated and dazed. "A son," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "I can scarcely believe it." "Congratulations," Clara replied warmly. "He's magnificent," James chuckled. "I think so, but I'm hardly impartial." He settled into the chair beside her. "Rebecca and I wanted to thank you properly for stepping in as you have. We'd like to offer you a permanent position here at Cottonwood." Clara looked at him, surprised. "Permanent?" "Rebecca will want to return to teaching eventually, but not full-time. We were thinking you could share the responsibilities, with you handling most of the academic subjects while Rebecca focuses on the practical skills and the younger children." He paused. It would mean a proper salary, of course, and continued use of the cabin. The offer was generous and exactly what Clara needed: security, meaningful work, and a place to belong. Yet she hesitated, aware of a small voice inside that whispered of other possibilities, other dreams. "May I think about it?" she asked. James nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Of course, there's no rush." He rose to leave, then paused. "By the way, Marshal Jackson sent word. He'll be passing through next week on his way back from Phoenix. Asked specifically how you were settling in." Clara's heart quickened. "He did, James confirmed, a knowing look in his eyes. "Seems our taciturn Marshal has developed a particular interest in the welfare of our schoolteacher." After James left, Clara remained on the porch, her thoughts in turmoil. The prospect of seeing Samuel again filled her with a nervous excitement she hadn't felt since her youth. Yet she chided herself for such foolishness. He was simply fulfilling his promise to check on her, nothing more. Still, she found herself paying special attention to her appearance the following week. Wearing her best dress, a a new one Rebecca had helped her make and arranging her hair with unusual care. When a rider was spotted approaching from the direction of town, Clara's heart leapt, only to fall when she recognized one of the ranch hands returning from an errand. 3 days passed with no sign of Samuel. Clara tried to focus on her teaching, but found her attention wandering, her eyes constantly drawn to the window that faced the main road. On the 4th day, she was alone in the schoolhouse after dismissing the children when she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Looking up from her papers, she saw him through the window, Samuel Jackson, dismounting in the yard outside the main house. Clara sat frozen, suddenly uncertain. Should she go to him, wait for him to seek her out? Her dilemma was resolved when Rebecca emerged from the house, greeted the marshal warmly, and pointed toward the schoolhouse. Clara quickly bent her head over her papers, pretending absorption in her work. She heard his boots on the wooden steps, then his familiar voice at the doorway. "Miss Everett." She looked up, hoping her face didn't betray her racing heart. Marshal Jackson. What a surprise. He stood framed in the doorway, hat in hand, looking exactly as she remembered, tall and steady, with those gray eyes that seemed to see right through her pretense of calm. "I promised to check on you," he said simply. Clara rose, smoothing her skirts nervously. "As you can see, I'm quite well," he nodded, stepping inside and glancing around the schoolroom. "The Thompsons speak highly of your teaching." "They've been very kind," she replied. "Rebecca had her baby a boy, William, so I heard. James is strutting like a peacock, according to folks in town." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Fatherhood suits him." There was an awkward pause, neither quite knowing how to bridge the weeks of separation. "How long will you be in Riverside?" Clara finally asked. "Just tonight, heading north tomorrow." He hesitated. "I thought, that is, if you're not otherwise engaged, perhaps you might join me for dinner at the hotel." The invitation surprised her. "I'd like that," she said before she could overthink her response. "Good." He seemed relieved. "I'll collect you at 6 if that's agreeable." "Very agreeable," she assured him. After he left, Clara raced back to her cabin to prepare, her mind whirling with questions. Why had he invited her to dinner? Was it merely kindness, or something more? And why did the prospect of spending an evening with him fill her with such anticipation? She bathed hastily, then donned her best dress again, a deep blue cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. She pinned her hair up in a simple but elegant style and even applied a touch of rose water, a gift from Rebecca. Samuel arrived promptly at 6, driving a buggy borrowed from the ranch stable. He wore clean clothing, his hair still damp from washing, and Clara was struck again by how handsome he was when not covered in trail dust. The ride to town was initially quiet, each searching for safe topics of conversation after their time apart. "Have you had any more trouble with slavers in the territory?" Clara finally asked. Samuel shook his head. "Not recently, though we're keeping watch. The territorial governor has made it a priority to stamp out such operations. Because of what happened to me and my mother." "That was part of it," he acknowledged. "Your mother's death, it shouldn't have happened. The system failed you both." The pain of her loss, dulled by time and new experiences, briefly sharpened again. "I still miss her every day." "You always will," he said quietly, "but it gets easier to carry." They reached Riverside as the sun was setting, casting the small town in golden light. The hotel dining room was nearly full, but Mrs. Reynolds had reserved a table for them by the window. "The Marshal's special guest deserves the best view," she told Clara with a meaningful glance that made Clara blush. Over a dinner of roast chicken and fresh vegetables, they gradually relaxed. Clara told him about her students and life at Cottonwood, while Samuel shared carefully edited stories of his work. She found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn out of her shell by his dry wit and attentive gaze. "James offered me a permanent position at the ranch," she told him as they lingered over coffee and apple pie. "Teaching alongside Rebecca once she's ready to return." "That's generous of them," Samuel replied. "Will you accept?" Clara traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. "I'm considering it. It's an excellent opportunity and I've grown fond of the children." "But," he prompted, sensing her hesitation, "but I'm not sure if it's truly what I want or simply what's available." She met his eyes. "Does that make sense?" He nodded slowly. "More than you might think." After Catherine died, I took the marshal's badge because it was offered, not because I'd planned for it. Sometimes life chooses our path when we're not ready to choose for ourselves. And now, do you regret that choice? No, he said without hesitation. It became my purpose. But that doesn't mean it's the only purpose I could have found. They walked back to the buggy in companionable silence, the night air cool against Clara's flushed cheeks. The main street was quiet, most establishments closed for the night save for the saloon, from which piano music and raucous laughter spilled into the darkness. As they passed the jail, a deputy emerged and hailed Samuel. "Marshal, got an urgent wire for you from Fort Whipple." Samuel frowned. "Excuse me," he said to Clara, then stepped aside to confer with the deputy. Clara waited by the buggy, watching his expression grow grave as he read the telegram. When he returned, his face was set in hard lines. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's been an attack on a stagecoach north of here. I need to leave tonight." Disappointment washed over her, but Clara nodded, understanding. "Of course, your duty comes first." "I'll take you back to Cottonwood first," he promised. "No," she said firmly. "You should go immediately if it's urgent." "I can stay at the hotel tonight and return to the ranch tomorrow." He hesitated, clearly torn. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely. Mrs. Reynolds will look after me, and I'm sure James can send someone to collect me in the morning." Still he hesitated. "Clara, I had hoped for more time." The simple admission sent warmth through her. "As did I," she replied softly. For a moment she thought he might say more, might even take her hand but the deputy called out again, and the moment passed. "Be safe," she said as he prepared to leave. "I will." He touched the brim of his hat in farewell. "And Clara, think carefully about the Thompsons' offer. A good home is hard to find in this territory." With that, he was gone, striding toward the jail where his horse awaited. Clara watched him go, a strange mixture of emotions churning within her: disappointment at their abbreviated evening, worry for his safety, and a growing certainty that her feelings for Samuel Jackson had progressed far beyond gratitude or friendship. The next morning, James himself came to collect her, having received word of the marshal's hasty departure. As they drove back to Cottonwood, Clara found herself scanning the northern horizon, as if she might glimpse Samuel riding toward whatever danger awaited. "He's good at what he does," James commented, noting her distraction. "Best marshal in the territory, according to those who know." "I believe it," Clara replied, "but his work is so dangerous that it is." James flicked the reins gently. "Rebecca worries about him too. Says he needs someone to come home to, not just a job to do." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm sure the marshal's personal life is none of our concern," James chuckled. "Maybe not, but I've known Sam Jackson for 8 years and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." The weeks that followed brought no word from Samuel. Clara threw herself into her teaching, finding solace in the routine and the children's eager minds. Rebecca recovered well from childbirth and began to join Clara in the schoolhouse for short periods, baby William sleeping contentedly in a cradle near her desk. Summer gave way to autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and the harvest season. The ranch bustled with activity as cattle were rounded up and crops gathered. Clara found herself increasingly integrated into the rhythms of Cottonwood, no longer feeling like an outsider but a valued member of the community. Still, she had not given James her answer regarding the permanent position. Each time he inquired, she asked for more time, unable to commit fully when her heart remained unsettled. October brought the first frost and preparations for winter. Clara was helping Rebecca preserve peaches from the ranch's small orchard when a ranch hand burst into the kitchen. "Rider's coming," he announced. "Looks like the marshal, and he's got someone with him." Rebecca and Clara exchanged glances, then hurried outside, Clara wiping sticky hands on her apron. A small group of horsemen approached the ranch, Samuel at the lead. Beside him rode a slighter figure that Clara recognized with a shock: Elliot Warren, the mining man they had encountered at Parker's trading post months ago. As they drew closer, Clara saw that Warren's hands were bound to his saddle horn, and his face bore signs of a recent beating. The two men flanking him were deputies, their expressions grim. Samuel dismounted, his face haggard with exhaustion but his eyes lighting briefly when they found Clara. "James," he greeted the rancher, who had emerged from the barn. Need to impose on your hospitality. We're escorting this prisoner to Phoenix for trial, but one of my men is wounded. Need a place to rest overnight before continuing. Of course, James replied without hesitation. What happened? Samuel's jaw tightened. Warren here has been running an operation selling Chinese laborers, and anyone else he could get his hands on to mining operations across the territory. Been at it for years, according to our witness. Clara gasped, her gaze flying to Warren, who stared back with undisguised hatred. We found a camp north of Prescott, Samuel continued. 20 people in chains, including women and children. Some had been there for months. My God, Rebecca murmured, instinctively clutching baby William closer. Your prisoner appears to have resisted arrest, James observed, noting Warren's battered face. A cold smile touched Samuel's lips. He didn't appreciate being treated the way he treated his merchandise. Clara shivered at the barely contained fury in his voice. This was a side of Samuel she hadn't witnessed before the implacable lawman rather than the gentle protector she had come to know. Rosa will prepare rooms for your men, Rebecca said, and something to eat. You all look exhausted. While the deputies secured their prisoner in an unused bunkhouse, Samuel accompanied James to check on the wounded deputy, who had been shot in the thigh during Warren's capture. Clara returned to the kitchen with Rebecca, her mind reeling from the unexpected turn of events. Are you all right? Rebecca asked gently. You're pale, Clara nodded, mechanically resuming her work with the peaches. It's just what that man was doing. It's what happened to me to my mother. Rebecca's eyes widened. I didn't know. Samuel never told us the details. My mother died while we were being transported to Copper Creek to be sold, Clara explained, the words coming easier than she'd expected. That's where the marshal found me tied to an auction post beside her body. Rebecca reached for her hand, heedless of the sticky peach juice. Oh, Clara. I'm so sorry. It was months ago now, Clara said, trying to sound matter-of-fact, but seeing that man, knowing he was doing the same thing to others. It brings it all back, Rebecca finished for her. Of course it does. They worked in silence for a while, Clara grateful for the mundane task that kept her hands busy while her mind processed the day's events. Later, as she carried a tray of food to Samuel and his men in the bunkhouse, she overheard Warren's venomous words. You think you've won, Jackson. I've got friends in high places. I'll be out before you reach Phoenix. I doubt that, came Samuel's calm reply. The territorial governor is particularly interested in your case. Seems his niece was on that stagecoach you had attacked to capture more merchandise. She survived, in case you're wondering. Clara didn't wait to hear more, not wanting to face Warren again. She left the tray with one of the deputies and retreated to her cabin, her emotions in turmoil. That evening, a soft knock on her door roused her from unsettled thoughts. She opened it to find Samuel standing there, clean-shaven and in a fresh shirt, though the weariness remained etched in his features. I hope I'm not disturbing you, he said. Not at all, she replied, stepping back to allow him entry. Please come in. He hesitated before entering, as if uncertain of the propriety, but Clara was past caring about such niceties. After closing the door, she turned to find him standing awkwardly in the center of the small room, hat in hands. How is your deputy? She asked, resting comfortably. James says the wound is clean, no sign of infection. He paused. Clara, I'm sorry you had to see Warren. I didn't realize you'd be at the ranch when we arrived. It's not your fault, she assured him. And I'm glad you caught him. What he was doing, it's evil. Samuel nodded grimly. The worst kind, using people as commodities, treating them as less than human. His hand clenched on the brim of his hat. When I think about what happened to your mother to you. Don't, Clara said softly, moving closer. You saved me, and now you've saved others from the same fate. He looked down at her, his gray eyes troubled. I wanted to kill him, Clara. When we found that camp, saw what he'd done to those people. I wanted to put a bullet in him and be done with it. But you didn't, she reminded him. You brought him in to face justice. That's what separates you from men like him. Sometimes I wonder if it's enough, he admitted. Justice seems a pale substitute for what those people suffered. Clara took his hand, surprising both of them with her boldness. It has to be enough, otherwise we're no better than they are. His fingers tightened around hers, and for a long moment they stood connected, understanding flowing between them without words. Then, reluctantly, he released her hand. "I should go," he said. "We leave at first light tomorrow. So soon." She couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. "The sooner Warren faces a judge, the better," he hesitated. "But I'll be back this way in a few weeks, if you're still here." "I will be," she said quickly. "I've decided to accept the Thompsons' offer. Cottonwood is my home now." Something like relief crossed his face. "I'm glad." "It's a good place for you." "It is," she agreed, "but I find myself looking forward to visitors from Riverside." A smile touched his lips, transforming his weary features. "I'll remember that." As promised, Samuel and his men departed at dawn the next day, their prisoners securely bound and under heavy guard. Clara watched them go from the porch of her cabin, a strange mixture of emotions churning within her relief that Warren was facing justice, concern for Samuel's safety, and a growing certainty about her feelings for the taciturn Marshal. Life at Cottonwood settled back into its routine after their departure. Clara formally accepted the Thompsons' offer of permanent employment, a decision that brought her a sense of security she hadn't felt since before her father's death. The school thrived under her guidance, and as Rebecca gradually resumed teaching, they developed a partnership that played to both their strengths. 3 weeks after Samuel's departure, a letter arrived for Clara from Phoenix. Her hands trembled slightly as she recognized his handwriting on the envelope. "Dear Clara, Warren has been sentenced to 20 years hard labor for his crimes. Justice, such as it is, has been served. I find myself thinking often of our conversations, brief though they've been. Your perspective has a way of clarifying my own thoughts in a manner I find both refreshing and necessary. My duties will bring me to Riverside again before Christmas. I hope you will allow me to call on you then." With respect and admiration, Samuel the letter, formal and restrained though it was, Clara read multiple times, searching for meaning between the carefully chosen words. She composed several replies before settling on one that matched his tone while hinting at deeper feelings. "Dear Samuel, your news brings closure to a chapter of my life I had thought would remain forever unresolved. For that, I thank you, both for myself and for those who might have suffered a fate similar to my mother's had Warren's operations continued. Life at Cottonwood continues pleasantly. The school flourishes, and I have found unexpected fulfillment in teaching. The Thompsons have become like family to me, and yet I find there remains a space in my life that friendship alone cannot fill. I would welcome your visit whenever your duties permit. Until then, please take care. This territory needs its marshal, as do those of us who care for the man behind the badge. Sincerely, Clara." As November progressed, bringing colder weather and the first dusting of snow to the higher elevations, Clara found herself watching the road with increasing frequency. The Christmas season approached, bringing with it special preparations at the school, a pageant featuring the children, decorations made from pine boughs and red berries, and lessons that incorporated the holiday spirit. A week before Christmas, Rebecca cornered Clara in the schoolhouse after the children had departed. "You've been distracted lately," she observed. "Watching the road like a lovesick girl. I should know I was one once." Clara blushed. "I don't know what you mean," Rebecca laughed. "Of course you don't. It has nothing to do with a certain tall, gray-eyed lawman who writes to you with suspicious regularity." "He's written exactly twice," Clara protested. "Hardly regular correspondence. For Samuel Jackson, that's practically a declaration." Rebecca sat beside her, suddenly serious. "Clara, may I speak frankly? Of course. Samuel is a good man, one of the best, but his life, it's not an easy one to share. The constant danger, the long absences, the knowledge that each farewell could be the last." She touched Clara's hand gently. "I'm not saying this to discourage you, only to ensure you understand what loving such a man entails." Clara was silent for a moment, absorbing Rebecca's words. "I do understand," she said finally, "but I also understand that some things are worth the risk." Rebecca smiled. "Then I wish you both happiness, whatever form it may take." 2 days later, Clara was helping the older children rehearse their parts for the Christmas pageant when James appeared at the schoolhouse door. "Rider coming," he announced with a significant look at Clara. "Thought you might want to know." Clara's heart leapt, but she maintained her composure before the curious students. "Thank you, James. Children, please continue practicing your lines. Mary, you're in charge until I return." She stepped outside, smoothing her hair and straightening her collar before chiding herself for such vanity. Samuel had seen her covered in dirt and grief. A few stray hairs would hardly matter. The approaching rider was indeed Samuel, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. Clara waited on the schoolhouse steps, trying to contain her eagerness as he rode into the yard. He dismounted with fluid grace, securing his horse to the hitching post before turning to her. His face, normally so controlled, broke into a genuine smile when their eyes met. "Miss Everett," he greeted her formally, though his eyes conveyed a more personal message. "Marshal Jackson," she replied in kind, unable to suppress her answering smile. "This is a pleasant surprise." "I was in the area," he said, the standard explanation belied by the fact that Cottonwood was not on any usual patrol route. They stood looking at each other, both seemingly at a loss for words now that the moment they'd anticipated had arrived. Then the schoolhouse door opened and a young boy peered out. "Miss Everett, Mary says to tell you that Thomas forgot his lines again and Sarah is crying because her angel wings got bent." Clara laughed, the tension broken. "Tell Mary I'll be right there, Tommy." After the boy retreated, she turned back to Samuel. "Duty calls, it seems. We're preparing for the Christmas pageant." "I remember those from my youth," he said. "Always played a shepherd because I was tall enough to hold the crook." The casual revelation of a detail from his childhood delighted Clara. "Will you stay? For dinner, at least. I'm sure the Thompsons would be pleased to have you." "I'd like that," he replied. "And perhaps afterward, if you're not too tired, we might talk. There are things I'd like to discuss with you." The seriousness in his tone sent a flutter of anticipation through her. "Of course, I'll look forward to it." Clara returned to her students, finding it difficult to focus on bent angel wings and forgotten lines when her mind kept wandering to the upcoming evening. What did Samuel wish to discuss? She dared not hope too specifically, yet couldn't help the quickening of her pulse whenever she thought of their planned conversation. Dinner at the main house was a lively affair. The Thompsons welcomed Samuel warmly, little William cooing in delight when the marshal allowed the baby to grasp his finger. The conversation flowed easily, touching on ranch business, territorial politics, and the upcoming holidays. "Will you be in Riverside for Christmas, Marshal?" Rebecca asked as they enjoyed apple pie for dessert. "That's my hope," Samuel replied, "though it depends on what calls come in." "You should join us if you're free," James offered. "We always have a special dinner on Christmas Day." "The hands who don't have family nearby join us, and Clara, of course." "That's kind of you," Samuel said, his eyes briefly meeting Clara's across the table. "I'd be honored." After dinner, James suggested brandy in his study, but Samuel declined politely. "Another time, perhaps." "I promised Miss Everett a walk before it gets too late." James raised an eyebrow but made no comment, while Rebecca hid a smile behind her napkin. Clara fetched her shawl, and they stepped out into the clear, cold evening. They walked in silence at first, following a path that led away from the main house toward a grove of cottonwoods by the small creek that gave the ranch its water. The night was crisp but not bitter, the sky ablaze with stars. "It's beautiful here," Samuel commented. "Peaceful." "Yes," Clara agreed. "I've come to love it very much." They reached a bench placed beneath the largest cottonwood, its bare branches silvered by moonlight. Samuel gestured to it. "Shall we?" Clara sat, arranging her shawl more securely around her shoulders. Samuel remained standing for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot about the future lately," he began, his voice thoughtful. "About choices and paths not taken." Clara's heart quickened, but she remained silent, allowing him to continue at his own pace. "When Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over, the possibility of sharing my life with someone." He turned to look at her, his expression earnest. "I didn't expect to meet you, Clara, didn't expect to feel this way again." "And how do you feel?" she asked softly. He sat beside her, close but not touching. "Like I've been given a second chance I don't deserve but want more than anything." Clara's breath caught. "Samuel, let me finish," he said gently, "before I lose my nerve. My life is complicated, dangerous at times. I'm away more than I'm in one place. It's not the kind of life most women would choose. I'm not most women, Clara pointed out. A smile touched his lips. No, you're not. You're extraordinary. He reached for her hand, enveloping it in his larger one. I can't offer you a normal life, Clara. But I can offer you my heart, for whatever that's worth. Clara turned to face him fully, her free hand rising to touch his cheek. It's worth everything, she whispered. Samuel's eyes darkened as he leaned forward, hesitating just a breath away from her lips. May I? In answer, Clara closed the distance between them, meeting his kiss with a sureness that belied her inexperience. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the contact brief but filled with promise. When they parted, Samuel's expression was one of wonder. I've wanted to do that since Riverside, he admitted. I've wanted you to since Copper Creek, Clara confessed, bringing a chuckle from him, even covered in trail dust and scowling, even then. She squeezed his hand. Especially then, when you told me I would live for both. His expression sobered. I meant it. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. Clara leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. What happens now? Samuel's arm came around her shoulders, holding her close. Now we take it one day at a time. I'll continue my duties, but Riverside will become more than just another town on my route. It will be home. The word, so simple yet so profound, brought tears to Clara's eyes. I'd like that very much. They remained beneath the cottonwood for some time, talking of practical matters, how often he might visit, letters when he was away, the reality of loving a man whose duty often placed him in danger. Yet beneath the practicalities ran a current of joy, of possibilities neither had dared imagine months earlier. As they walked back to the main house, hand in hand now without hesitation, Clara felt a sense of rightness, of completion. The path ahead might not be easy, but they would walk it together. Samuel stayed at Cottonwood for 3 days, the longest he'd remained in one place outside of official business in years. He attended the school's Christmas pageant, his tall figure standing at the back of the crowded schoolhouse, eyes fixed not on the performing children but on their teacher, who glowed with pride and happiness. On his last evening, they sat together on the porch of Clara's cabin, wrapped in blankets against the December chill. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. An early Christmas gift, since I may not see you on the day itself. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Clara unwrapped it carefully to reveal a silver locket on a delicate chain. It's beautiful, she breathed, opening it to find it empty. Thank you. I thought you might want to put a likeness of your mother inside, he explained. And perhaps someday one of me. Clara closed her fingers around the precious gift. I don't have a photograph of her, she said sadly. Actually, you do, Samuel replied. From his other pocket, he produced a folded paper. I had the deputy in Copper Creek check the slaver's possessions after his arrest. This was among them. Clara unfolded the paper to reveal a small tintype photograph of her mother, taken perhaps a year before her death. Elizabeth Everett's serene face gazed back at her, bringing fresh tears to Clara's eyes. How did you? When? She couldn't complete the questions. I sent for it after our dinner in Riverside, Samuel explained. It arrived in Phoenix just as Warren's trial concluded, it seemed. Fitting somehow. Clara threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of his gift. Thank you, she whispered against his neck. This means more than I can express. He held her close, his cheek resting against her hair. You're welcome, Clara. When they parted the next morning, their farewell was tinged with sadness but not despair. They had found each other against impossible odds. A few weeks' separation seemed manageable in comparison. I'll return for Christmas if I can, Samuel promised. If not, expect me by New Year's at the latest. Clara stood on tiptoe to kiss him goodbye, no longer concerned with who might be watching. Be safe, she murmured. Remember you have someone waiting for you now. Christmas came and went without Samuel's return, though a telegram arrived explaining he'd been delayed by an incident near the Mexican border. Clara celebrated with the Thompsons and the ranch hands, wearing her locket with her mother's picture inside, feeling her presence in a way she hadn't since her death. 3 days after Christmas, a winter storm descended on the territory, blanketing Cottonwood Ranch in several inches of snow. The children reveled in the rare white landscape, while the adults concerned themselves with the practical matters of keeping livestock fed and water supplies flowing. Clara was helping Rebecca prepare dinner when James burst into the kitchen, his expression grave. "Rider coming," he announced. "One of Hanson's boys from the Circle H says there's been an accident on the North Road, a stagecoach overturned in the snow, several passengers injured." Rebecca immediately began gathering medical supplies. "How many injured?" 4 or 5, according to the boy. "They're bringing them here since it's closer than town." Clara and Rebecca worked quickly, preparing the dining room as a makeshift infirmary. Within the hour, wagons arrived carrying the injured, an elderly couple with minor cuts and bruises, a young mother with a broken arm, and the stage driver with a head wound. The 5th passenger, carried in on a stretcher fashioned from a blanket, made Clara's heart stop. Samuel lay unconscious, blood matting his dark hair, his normally tanned face pale beneath the dirt and blood. "Samuel," she cried, rushing to his side. James caught her arm. "Let Rebecca examine him first, Clara." Rebecca was already bending over the marshal, her movements swift and sure as she checked his injuries. "Head wound, possibly cracked ribs," she reported, "but his pulse is strong. Help me get him to the guest room." The next hours passed in a blur of activity as Clara assisted Rebecca in tending to all the injured, but especially Samuel. His head wound required cleaning and stitching, which Rebecca performed with practiced efficiency. "He's lucky," she told Clara as they finished. "The cut is deep but clean. No sign of fracture that I can feel. The ribs are bruised, maybe cracked, but not broken through. He'll be in pain when he wakes, but he should recover fully with rest." "When will he wake?" Clara asked anxiously. "Hard to say. Head injuries are unpredictable. Could be hours, could be days." Rebecca squeezed her shoulder. "Stay with him if you like. Talk to him. Sometimes that helps." Clara settled into a chair beside Samuel's bed, taking his hand in hers. His skin was warm, his breathing steady, small reassurances she clung to as the hours passed. "You promised to be careful," she chided softly. "This isn't what I had in mind." Night fell, and still Samuel remained unconscious. Clara refused to leave his side, dozing occasionally in her chair, but always maintaining her hold on his hand. She talked to him intermittently, telling him about the Christmas pageant, the children's delight in the snow, anything to fill the silence and give him an anchor to follow back to consciousness. Shortly after midnight, his fingers twitched in hers. "Samuel," she whispered, leaning closer. His eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing confused gray eyes. "Clara," his voice was hoarse, relief flooded through her. "Yes, I'm here, you're at Cottonwood. There was an accident with the stagecoach." He tried to sit up, wincing as pain registered. "The other passengers." "All being cared for," she assured him, gently pressing him back against the pillows. "No one was critically injured." Samuel relaxed slightly. "I was coming to see you," he said. "For Christmas." "I know." She smoothed his hair back from the bandage on his forehead. "You're a few days late, but I'll forgive you this once." A weak smile touched his lips. "Generous of you." "I am known for my generous nature," she teased, her heart light with relief. "Now rest, doctor's orders." "Rebecca's not a doctor," he pointed out, close enough in these parts. Clara leaned down to kiss his cheek. "Sleep. I'll be here when you wake." Samuel recovered slowly over the next 2 weeks, his natural restlessness making him a challenging patient. Clara split her time between her teaching duties and caring for him, reading to him when he was too weak to sit up, playing chess with him as he regained strength, and eventually helping him take short walks around the ranch as his body healed. During this enforced convalescence, their relationship deepened. Without the pressure of imminent separation, they talked for hours, learning the details of each other's lives: Samuel's childhood in Tennessee, Clara's education in St. Louis, their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future. By mid-January, Samuel was well enough to return to his duties, though Rebecca insisted he limit himself to desk work for at least another month. On his last evening at Cottonwood, he and Clara walked to their bench beneath the cottonwood, now bare of snow after a January thaw. "I've been thinking," Samuel said as they sat side by side, about the future." Clara felt a flutter of nervousness. Oh, he turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. These past weeks, having you near each day, it's been the happiest time I can remember. He paused. I don't want to go back to the way things were, seeing you only when my duties permit. What are you saying? Clara asked, hardly daring to hope. Samuel drew a deep breath. I'm saying I love you, Clara Everett. I want to build a life with you. Not someday, not when circumstances are perfect, but now. Joy bloomed in Clara's chest. I love you too, Samuel, more than I can express. Then marry me, he said simply. Be my wife, my partner, my home. Tears filled Clara's eyes, tears of happiness, not grief. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and passion and shared dreams. When they parted, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. I've carried this since Phoenix, he admitted. Bought it after sending your mother's photograph, hoping I'd find the courage to offer it one day. From the pouch, he produced a ring, a delicate gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. It's not fancy, he said, suddenly uncertain. It's perfect, Clara assured him as he slipped it onto her finger. Like us. They were married in the Riverside Church on a bright April morning in 1879, with the Thompsons and their entire school in attendance. Rebecca, now fully recovered from William's birth, stood as Clara's witness, while James stood with Samuel. Clara wore a gown of ivory, silk, a gift from the women of Riverside, who had pooled their resources to provide it. Samuel, resplendent in a new black suit, watched her walk down the aisle with an expression of such naked adoration that several onlookers were moved to tears. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, spoken in clear voices that carried to the farthest corners of the small church. I, Samuel Jackson, take thee, Clara Everett, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you all the days of my life, to protect you with my strength, to comfort you with my tenderness, and to remain faithful to you alone until death parts us. I, Clara Everett, take thee, Samuel Jackson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you all the days of my life, to support you in times of trouble, to rejoice with you in times of happiness, and to remain faithful to you alone until death parts us. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Clara felt her mother's presence strongly, not in grief but in joy, as if Elizabeth Everett were there to witness her daughter's happiness. The silver locket containing her photograph rested against Clara's heart, a tangible connection to the past as she stepped into her future. The reception was held at the Riverside Hotel, where Mrs. Reynolds had outdone herself with decorations and refreshments. The entire town seemed to have turned out to celebrate, for Samuel was well respected, and Clara had made many friends during her time at Cottonwood. As twilight fell, the newly wedded couple slipped away from the festivities to begin their life together. Samuel had purchased a small house on the outskirts of Riverside, close enough for Clara to continue teaching at Cottonwood when she wished, yet allowing them their own private space. It was a simple home, but furnished with care, a sturdy bed, comfortable chairs before the fireplace, bookshelves filled with volumes Samuel had collected over the years, and Clara's few inherited books. A desk stood in one corner for Samuel's reports, while a small piano, a wedding gift from the Thompsons, awaited Clara's touch in another. Welcome home, Mrs. Jackson, Samuel said as he carried her across the threshold. Clara looked around, taking in the evidence of his preparations: fresh flowers on the table, a fire laid ready in the hearth, curtains at the windows that matched the blue of her favorite dress. It's perfect, she said, turning in his arms to face him. Absolutely perfect. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Samuel continued his work as marshal, though he arranged his duties to keep him closer to Riverside when possible. Clara divided her time between teaching at Cottonwood and creating a home in Riverside, finding fulfillment in both roles. Their first child, a son they named James after their dear friend, arrived in the spring of 1880. Samuel, who had ridden through the night to reach them after receiving word that Clara had gone into labor, arrived just in time to witness his son's birth. He has your eyes, Clara said tiredly as she placed the swaddled infant in his father's arms. Samuel cradled his son with reverent hands, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. "He's so small," he whispered, "but strong," Clara assured him. Like his father. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, with Samuel's absences balanced by his complete devotion when home. Clara learned to live with the anxiety that accompanied loving a lawman, finding strength in the community they had built, and the knowledge that their life together, however unconventional, was rich with purpose and love. When their daughter Elizabeth, named for Clara's mother, arrived 2 years later, Samuel took a month's leave to help Clara adjust to managing two small children. The territorial governor, impressed by Samuel's record, granted the leave without question, even sending a gift for the new baby. "I never imagined this," Samuel confessed one evening as they sat on their porch, watching young James play while baby Elizabeth slept in Clara's arms. "A family, a home. After Catherine, I thought that path was closed to me forever." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "And I never imagined finding such happiness after watching my mother die. Yet here we are, he echoed, his arm tightening around her, living for both just as I promised. And for ourselves," Clara added, "for our children, for the future." Samuel kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "For all of it," he agreed. "Together." As the sun set over Riverside, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara thought of how far she had come from that terrible day in Copper Creek. The grief of her mother's loss would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her. Instead, she was defined by love for her husband, for her children, for the life they were building together. She had indeed learned to live for both, carrying her mother's memory forward while creating her own story, one day at a time, in the arms of the man who had saved her in more ways than one. The end.